going to be a while, folks. That's all I can say. It's going to be a while. Although I was encouraged last week in the chat, in a couple other places, people striding out. They're taking their chance. They're doing their thing. They're stopping. They're finding a wrong, and they're trying to right it. And well, it sounded to me like everybody was somewhat successful. As I tell you, behind the Woodshed, what we do, we sometimes don't get a direct credit, if you will, if we're looking for that. Direct credit for what we do. And so I've tended to learn. Let me just suggest to you, when you start realizing that there is a victory in silence, the same silence that we are, that they win by, when you act and they become silent, you've won. Now, it may not be over, but you've at least proven the point, and now you've got them on the run a bit. You've got them in a place that you know they're weak. Who are these? Anybody who comes against you in the place that you found was happening wrong, that you went to go make it right. That's who the they is. And so I'm hearing certain things. People doing things outside their comfort zone. I'm really kind of thrilled about that little part, but there's not enough of us still. In other words, it really is going to take a lot of us, and if I ever get through all the tabs today, and I think I might, you'll hear me bring up another case I brought back to you a long time ago that explains this condition pretty succinctly to us, if I didn't have any other source to know about it before. And I identified the case and what it was saying from my previous studies about that very point. So it was a correlating confirmation. To let y'all know, I just hit the Twitter sphere and wherever the emails are going through. I guess Craig Roberts through a report on AJ, they have now declared, it's official, folks, if you need to hear it from them, AJ, they have declared the police state is here. Which should be pretty funny to you all, because, behind Woodshed, we've been declaring it since almost the beginning of this broadcast and proving it, not as an opinion, and then for sure, beyond a shadow of a doubt, in the NDAA imposition. So all the big voices, even the so-called alternative media, they can't compete with being behind Woodshed. The principles behind the Woodshed are just how you work. And you see this, when those principles are being violated, you can call them out pretty quick. You don't go on the next sensationalism. So it's official. We're in a police state. It's okay. Now I'm going to ask all those that are out there calling it out. Finally, what are you going to do about it? And I guess that's the thing I look at for me. I've been telling you things that you can do, despite the problem. And everybody, we're living in an administrative world at this point, and there's some bureaucrat that thinks that they're the king of their little world, and these people can be addressed. And if we don't, they keep coming down with regulations on your life, whether from whatever source. And what techniques I've built through looking at the world the way I now see it, not the way I was told. It's certainly not there. We're certainly not there yet, but it doesn't mean that that's not available to us. And that's the other thing. Are we choosing to watch it happen and hope we get out of this one without too much more hassle? Or do we just want to step up and make, do what we can? Because that's really maybe what we're here for. We're here to be that example and that difference. We can be the last people. I tell you, we're the last memory. I know I am. Something almost got past me. I wouldn't even known about it. And I come in in a family that was in mining. Didn't know anything about the law. We were just mining. 10 years old, I'm designing equipment against things I didn't understand. We were in mercury, and it was outlawed. It was not, again, when you start finding out the truth about it all, it's just a big, this whole regulation authority is looking for the next evil to vilify so that they get regulation power, like carbon dioxide. Now, we were in a mercury mine. I didn't know anything about what the environmental quality was when I was 10. I was just barely coming around to figuring out, what was going on. And yet, I heard the problem and immediately had an answer, though I wasn't technically able. Couldn't make the model that I ended up asking my father to build for me to solve the problem that would have stopped the state from stopping us. See, all I knew was my dad and my grandfather weren't going to get the money for the metal that they were mining because they were going to outlaw it. And that meant food on our table. A lot of mouths to feed. And we weren't doing so. We didn't ever go hungry, but I think I might have mentioned we knew breakfast from dinner because of what was in the pancakes. In the morning it was berries, and at night it was corn. And so things were lean. And so all I know is that when I was young, there was a government thing I didn't understand was coming to take my dad's and my grandfather's hard work away from them. And so I designed a system at 10 years old to solve the problem no one could see. I don't know what that puts me anywhere. I had my dad make the model. He made it. It worked. And I said, well, here's the answer. Why don't we do that? But see, when you're on the ropes and regulatory government comes in and oppresses you that way, no one really thinks about anything ahead of their action, and you get the precautionary principle working. Life goes down the tubes. Things get destroyed. Producers are harmed. And that's my beginning, and that's the start of it. And then we find out later what the real truth about the mercury is, at least the elemental part, and we have an actual biological construction that happens in places when because there's no mining, actually. And I never understood even at 10, as I'm starting to come into the world and I'm starting to see just things going on, not whether I fully understood them. It didn't make sense to me why we would be stopped pulling out a poison out of the rocks. If it's a poison, why don't they let us? I asked my dad, my father, I said, why don't they let us pull it out? And he would just shake his head, because that's who we are. We're a people that just think that the authority is coming down to do better, and we just don't have anything against it. So here we go. I'm decades past all that, realizing, that was a big lie and a fraud, and it was a plan to take producers out. And I happened to find myself right back into doing my own mining, or trying to, and then ran into the same wall, and then I had a different awareness. And we're doing what we can to address that. And I know it's addressable. That's why I feel encouraged that if any of you decide to pick up the gauntlet, we in our individual little places can really prevail. If nothing else right now, we're stalemating everywhere. Everywhere we step in, we stop the agencies. You got a regulation that came down that makes things difficult, you can go challenge it. And the question then becomes, well, are you just going to live underneath the oppression and the servitude and drag your life out, barely making it every year to some quota that some bureaucrat makes, or are you going to go find out that maybe they're wrong and they're not doing it right, and how that happened, and that they don't have the authority that they have? And anybody who's it's just so simple at some level, anybody who comes underneath an agency whose ultimate authority comes from the federal government, and that could be agencies in the state. So let's, for instance, look at your local Department of Environmental Quality in the states. Typically, those were established to implement the federal laws. That's a federal agency right there. It's just an agent of a federal agency. The federal guidelines and rules apply. And you can stop them by going to stop those stupid rules that shut you down, that have no real basis, or you find the agenda. You can shut them down due to the National Environmental Policy Act, which shows that the environment is a definition, has two parts. It has the natural part, the natural environment, and the human environment, as they call it. I like to say it's the mankind's environment, because human, is that monster. We're not animals that way. And so I don't accede to that, but we have to use the language that the environment is one, natural environment is one part, and human environment is the second part of the term environment, and they have to balance their regulations in favor of the human environment. In other words, production. What I talked to you about land disposal and the obligations of the government. And so you have a direct angle right in there. And if you want to go even further and and it's maybe a little bit more obscured by state law for state agencies, those state laws can't counter what the federal guideline is. Now, they'll tell you that they can make it more restrictive, but that's still not supposed to be the case where it interferes with another obligation, let's say in Congress, where the land was disposed to public use, and that public use is what guides the Fifth Amendment. And unless they, as I was telling you, like the pipeline, unless they declare that to be a public use, and then there's a hearing that says that public use is bigger than the public use that Congress disposed, or the state disposed that land to the use, it still doesn't prevail underneath the Fifth Amendment. There's nothing they can pay you for it. And so there's a way at all these things. If you just think about it a bit, and like for myself, if anybody has a question, markonthebeach.com, I try to give an answer that is really more of a direction. And then you pick, like I tell you, get you to the front of I've been to a lot of the trails. I've been down quite a bit of the trails of obfuscation that we find. I've seen quite a bit. I have never seen it all, that's for certain. I don't know that I want to. I think I've seen enough. I can direct everybody to the trailhead, and I can say, okay, if I've been down that trail or not. If not, I'll tell you some principles you can use when you go down the trail. And you will find what you need down in there about what they're really doing wrong and how to answer that problem. But you have to take those steps. So I'm a little encouraged that, a lot encouraged that we can do it. I'm a little encouraged that last week I had some feedback that people are doing certain things, even outside their normal thoughts. They never heard of anybody doing these sorts of things. For themselves. Brand new things. They just said, okay, I'm going to stop. This is what it's going to take to stop this wrong. And they did it. And whether or not they were actually pivotal in doing that is irrelevant. The outcomes that I heard were successful, whatever the reason was. So like we said, we don't look for a pat on the back. We look for the outcome. Like when I told you before, I sued the federal Forest Service district ranger and his wife. And, they didn't let me have that case entered into court. And I went all the way to the state Supreme Court to get that. They agreed with everything. They granted me everything in my case, and they just denied the remedy. But in the meantime, the road got opened. That's all I was interested in. I didn't need a win in the court, actually. And so I chose that when I got what I wanted based on my action, I took that as the win. And so this is a different way to approach things. There's nothing really, everything's fluid and dynamic. So you take what you get where you get it, and you can apply things in a fluid and dynamic way, and that's really a pretty interesting power as well. So just anything, if you learn a little bit, you can figure out unorthodox ways to approach things that aren't real wild, and that usually is enough. But what it takes, again, over and over and over, is just not making the excuse that nothing can be changed, that you can't do anything. Something's affecting you. You're going to have to go address the trespasser. And there's real easy ways, real succinct ways to do that. In fact, I've been talking with friends of mine. We've been doing this for quite a few years. That's what we've been like, almost a cauldron of refinement of how to take these monstrous, you talk, 70, 80,000 just code regulations, let alone the law, the code, the code that these rules implement. You get 60, 70, maybe 100,000 rules every year. How do you deal with that? It seems like it's overwhelming, but when you look at how to apply it, you go to the code actually that it's supposed to implement, and you find the constraints of the subject matter over that law. That's when it becomes real easy to deal with. And so you just find the weakest link. You find the narrowest part of their hold, the most tenuous place, and you cut right there. And so this thing, we can get these things going. I'm encouraged again, just to watch anybody do anything outside of what they normally did and had some measure of success, and it didn't. There was no risk at all, as I've been telling you. There's no real risk in any of the things I actually say. The risk is not doing something and have some authority come on you and come thumping on you with their big boot. And this is despite the police state. This is despite the martial law you're under. This is despite the prison you live in. See, maybe that's the eternal optimism. I'm not giving up. I don't care what this is about, what they think this is about. We have so many ways to analyze the wrong that's on us and point it out that every day we're getting a lot closer to the fact that almost every conversation I have with somebody, I cannot not talk about the felony that you can identify in about 10 seconds that an official does. Literal felony, theft by extortion. They're not supposed to bring a color of authority and defeat you. And they're not supposed to give information or omit to give you information that defeats you in that color of authority. That's a felony right up front. When you do it in the federal sector, that's going to be a couple of felonies. And if you use the mail, that's another one. So simple. And I'm not talking have you heard me talk about NEPA now? No. National Environmental Protection Agency Act? No. We're way beyond that. We don't have to get all involved now. We're just talking about, I have a right, and you took an official authority, and you violated me, whether you did it covertly, overtly, or omittedly. Omittedly? Can I use that? So, again, just 2 or 3 people doing something is enough to kind of excite me a bit here, and I hope that it's just a little bit of encouragement that you too can step up and step into a wrong, and you can make it right. And quickly, I was able to hear Solo Man comes on by himself, talks with Freakers Ball. Hope you pick up that on Friday, the music and discussion. Although, they're starting to pick up more news. I'm almost having to change my board by the time we get to Sunday. They start picking up so much ongoing events during the week that Moose Girl and Grimner are talking about certain topics. But Solo Man comes in and from Brazilistan, and talks to us. And I think it's another insight that I think really we just need to hear our insights and start focusing on a lot of that. And anyway, I don't know how he thought I had how I have the authority, but he asked my permission to use the word evil on his list of naming them. I told you I don't like calling people names, but he's naming them, and I'll go with that. Shapeshifter militars, the soulless shapeshifter militars, the military people. And he wants to know if he can add evil on the front end of that. Solomon, it was never my decision. If you want to use the word evil, go for it. I concur. It's we have to call it out. You do a great job bringing what you do, and I do appreciate it. I do appreciate your support of the broadcast, and you getting together down there with all your cohorts down there to keep that memory and keep that insight. That's really important to go. As I've been learning how this thing seems to be working, we have to break down and break through, and then break out. And that's the prison that we live in. That's a mental construct that we can break out immediately. And then, really, it's not just standing there in the quiet. I told you, I went into the wilderness. I was able to hold out for 7 months, and then they come from everywhere to kind of involve themselves with you. And every interaction is a death interaction. Wasn't quite so bad then, but you could still tell that everyone's armed, and any mistake can happen. And they're coming out to me. See, I've never been into anything illegal, like, in the middle of the forest, you think in fact, that's how they approached me. They were coming with the excuse that I was either growing dope or making meth. And that's a dangerous, dangerous mindset to be walking up against, especially when the first time it happened. I was surprised because I'm an innocent that way. I've really it's never been in my mind to do so. So that was a new thing. And it's a lesson. You realize, wow, these people can come up with pretty wild stories to justify themselves. And before then, it wasn't so much quite shoot and kill, although that had already happened to me, and I knew that, but it didn't. You keep wanting to think that these people that are sitting in official positions are going to be the good guy. And at that time, there was a little more good guys, and so they didn't. Not all of them brought the gun out and tried to execute you, but they did come up with these stories to justify their existence to invade your world. So I went out to the middle of nowhere. I did nothing. I understood what I needed to do, and that's not good enough. That's why I came back, if you will, came back to the world, and said, well, there's no place to run, and I don't like what I'm seeing, and I've maybe taken on quite a bit to chew, but we've refined it back down to that mining law because, again, I was focused through property and insisting that there be a law and there be a lawful jurisdiction to decide the law that does perfect the function of a legitimate government, which is really there to sit and repose in a neutrality to protect you against someone else's incursions. The state was never supposed to be as big and bad as they have become, and that was one indication that maybe we weren't no longer inside the constraint that we were told. So, anybody wants to use the word evil, go ahead. I think I picked it up from Monty Python. If you want to think how much of a joke I laughed behind the scenes, if I could just get beyond how serious this is, this entire thing is really just one big, terrible joke, and it's laughable. The people in power are laughable. They literally are laughing. We have people in the seats of decision that are, when you look at the reality, they're the laughing stock of our society. And I'm really pushing myself hard to try and just approach the whole thing that way, because it is much better at some point when you start seeing, in the face of the crickets. It's I have to try to keep my if it's sanity that's on the test here, I have to keep my sanity. Now, off the broadcast, I kind of laugh at a lot of stuff. It's just on and on and on. Just ridiculous scenarios that are going on that people just allow. It's really kind of fascinating to watch a whole. All of us wanting to think we're all so cool and big and sovereign and all this stuff, and we watch and we allow it. We do nothing against it. I just, again, getting lost in the thought. EFF wins battles over secret legal opinions on government spying. Thought you should need to know this. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, Defending Your Rights in the Digital World is their moniker headline there on their webpage. And the Department of Justice to release analysis of law enforcement intelligence agency access to census records. Of all things, folks, what is this? Census records are they being blocked out and all, whatever. That, again, I made big jokes about the census. when they were trying to take it. I told you, I gave you information on how you could avoid being part of the census. There's quite a few number of ways. Remember, we were looking at all the exceptions, no different than your vaccine, your quarantine law. I said there's one exception. Understand it, have that word in your mouth, and that's the word you place before them, and that pretty well starts to mess things up for them. There's all these tools right here that we weren't told about. I mean, I've had to go and research them out. I'm not the only one. There's not many of me, actually, but we are out here. And, so if you just start having these very simple refinements put into your vocabulary, you can start resolving against you can enforce your resolve against the tyranny that you see. But the Electronic Freedom Foundation, in this digital big data world we live in, has won its 4-year Freedom of Information Act lawsuit over secret legal interpretations of a controversial section of the Patriot Act, including legal analysis of law enforcement and intelligence agency access to census records. So just to let you know, people, you can fight this. It took 4 years. When you commit to this, understand it'll take years, and you just prepare for that discussion. It's not, to me, certainly not the most efficacious. You really do want to make the court case the last thing. And just from the standpoint, we now know that there's no actual legitimate court of competent jurisdiction. So everything you actually do out of the courts is illegitimate, to tell you the truth, because any order, any decision made from a court that has not found that it has jurisdiction, and lawfully so, those orders and those decisions are all void, what they call ab initio, from the beginning. They don't even, actually just before the beginning. They don't even exist. Literally, you can believe in them, and you can follow them, but they don't exist. And so it's required on these courts, and any authority, even the administrative authority, has to declare its jurisdiction. Now, sometimes that's kind of declared in the law, but when you have a question, you have a right to question it, and then they have to put that on the record. So again, all these little details are not very hard. There's quite a bit of them. I mean, if you really, and only because the enemy uses all those failures to beat you. That's why we have to know them. As I talk to people that I deal with daily, we're not fighting the law. We're not at war with the law. The law for us the property law, the disposal law, the intent of Congress at this point over public lands and then disposed lands, and your patent lands, which the government wants you to believe is real property, a taxable property, not what it is, and then we just don't force it. Those laws are really our foundation. Those aren't wrong. What's wrong is when we get pulled off of that narrow path, and they take us into the deep dark woods and beat us up. We let that happen, actually. They can force us, but then that's more obvious. So we are not at war with the law. The law brought peace. The mining law told me that. The origination of the mining law, 2 miners beating their brains out over a claim, and one of them saying, "Look, we got to do this better from the future." And from that springs this concept of what mining law was, as adopted by mining districts, which were governments for miners. They established their own governments in the mining districts, was actually to bring peace. And that's why you get the sheriff. See, in the West, for those of you that are not out here in the West, where I tend to haunt, is the mining districts were actually as I said before, they were the originations of some of the counties. And they just transferred the type of power and authority over into a more general venue. And so the sheriff, which a mining district could have, not all of them did. Everyone was different because the miners decided what they wanted. It's no different than Jefferson Mining District. We have decided at this point, not to do certain things we could do for whatever reasons we've decided that, and we're focusing, mainly it's just to focus our energy. But we have a lot more power we could wield, and having a sheriff in the district would be one thing, and that translates to the sheriff today. Well, what's the main duty of the sheriff? And it underpins the main duty of the government, which was to protect property. That he's supposed to keep the peace. Right? So this is what the sheriff does, is keeps the peace. Well, what peace is he keeping? He's keeping the law. What's the law protecting? The property. So without getting too lost in all that, that's just an overview that we can use. We start saying, oh, that's their place. It doesn't have to get lost in all the words, all the study and all the opinion that an attorney gives you. It's just a member of a legal entity. That's all these people are. And their members are the judges. They're just legal members. They're legal entity members. That's all. It's like Weight Watchers. Think about that. So EFF comes along, they're having trouble, they don't like this digital thing, they find out the Section 215 of the Patriot Act is a controversial provision, it's relied on by the NSA, they attack it. They lay out, they got attorneys here that are doing this, and that's a whole other discussion on how that's working. I sometimes wonder if maybe the discussions are made in order to draw out the problem and give credit for in other words, if they don't make the argument right, then very narrow parts of the law get argued and not other parts. And that's one of the other problems we found out. In other words, one of the cases we saw, the court came out and said, but they didn't make a record on this. Well, that was the attorneys not making that record, see? And so that part of the decision, which was really necessary, didn't get decided. And because it was missing, that part didn't make inclusion with the total decision to make it more correct. And so the system finds, I can't call them loopholes, it finds avoidances from actually doing the more proper thing. As I was able to identify in the California discussion on the so-called Reinhardt decision. And then the Judge Ochoa down there talking about the minors, and he used the Reinhardt decision, which relied on a Granite case, and it's all adulteration. They literally threw the mining law under the bus of the Granite decision, which was an environmental law imposition that doesn't have a basis in law to be imposed upon a land disposal, soil disposal enactment. And so you can extract, as I did, you take the ruling, I can extract the imposition, and when you pull and extract the imposition out of the ruling, which is adulteration, which is created by a bar member, which is created by that system that's oppressing us, you start, well, there's the law, you just pull out they literally put it in like a puzzle piece. I can pull them out just like puzzle pieces, and you read what's left, and well, there's the law, why didn't they do that? Well, they didn't do that because the whole system is set up as a prison. You're in a controlled construct. And so we sued that system, and they're having trouble with us right now. For those of you listening, and just on the procedural side, they sent back our package. And they didn't do it with a signature, I can tell you that. So now we have another step. We'll go to the postmaster, look for an interference with our post, because what we're now after is we're going to find out whether or not that judge committed a crime, or whether or not there's somebody in the clerk's office that's committing a crime. Somebody is going to be fingered on this. Now we'll use an external agency to prove out who that is. And this is the game. It is the game. This is the pieces that are being run. We didn't get a signature like we did last time, which I used to appeal. They figured out, we figured it out, so they tried to do a double tap on the clerk. Well, we had caught the clerk, and now we're after who's interfering with the mail. That's mail fraud. And now there's going to be two people involved. That's a conspiracy. And they omitted to tell us the right law. That's a state felony. Now I got them. I got a federal officer committing a state wrong. Now, do I have them? No. Well, we can make evidence of it. Why don't I have them? Because there's really no enforcement. What's enforcement? It's you getting your remedy and justice being served. The cover under which they supposedly act, and we identified that they don't. And so this is the work that we have to do. You do that at your local level as well. The interesting problem for someone local, administratively, is they have no cover, actually. Not like you might think. Not like the judgeships seem to believe they have. Everyone seems to think these offices are immune, but they're not. See, without the declaration of jurisdiction, they're all sitting without jurisdiction and acting contrary to our right of remedy. And yours. I know I'm saying a lot of stuff fast here, just thoughts that are crossing through my mind on how this lays out. That in some regard it empowers me. I laugh at some point at this. These people are just they're incompetent. We've caught them. They're criminals, and that's really the end of it for me. We just got criminals everywhere. Now what? And so we persist. We persist in making evidence, and hopefully a larger world will see it and finally get fed up enough that we stand up all at once, hopefully, or at least in numbers sufficient enough to say enough is enough. We're going to exercise our Second Amendment right, not to discharge our arms, but to actually alter or abolish what we see has infiltrated our government and get our governments back. Get them back into the place that they stopped attacking people. Get them back into the place where essentially depoliticize producers. You know, I see this, in fact, this is what we're heavily into right now. All of a sudden, I had said a long time ago we weren't going to be looking, as a strategy, we wouldn't be looking at economic development conditions, because that really doesn't address what our problem is. Our problem is people don't understand the basis of what how a producer comes, how it exists, and they don't understand the law. And the Bar Association doesn't teach land law; they teach essentially contracts. And so, you know, as what came out in one of the as a really big meeting that we were not invited to as a district, but we made our way. Had agents, had a minor as a coordination officer make entry into it. The question was asked whether or not the attorneys in attendance understood what a bill of attainder was, and that question came up because there was 5 bills before the Senate, and the government that a couple of these attorneys had put forward that weren't recognized for the bill of attainder that it was. So they asked the head attorney and representative of the state whether he understood a bill of attainder, and this attorney said no. He says, how he said it was, you've been studying all this a lot more than me. How about if you tell us what it is? And so these attorneys aren't trained in any of this stuff, and that should bother you. So that should be that should tell you why we're not why we're not protected, and this is where the work begins. And it just takes a matter of bodies being thrown at this, because it doesn't take that many, but it does take the bodies, and those need to be in places that are perpetually and persistently giving the witness against the illusion of authority. And then other minds watching who didn't know this start learning and listening, and they start coming into the more correct view. And now at that point you start seeing more support, and it just takes a while. As I tell you, it's like trying to turn a freighter with an oar for a canoe. I mean, it's just not going to happen very, very fast at all if it does. So you just got to hang in there with it and just keep hanging in there and try to get the bow to move ever so much. And then momentum comes in once you start to do that. So that's what it's like. But at some point that bow does move, and it does start to change course. And then more people that come to your way of thinking that you can support in the objective law, the more paddles start going in, to turn that freighter. And we turn the ship of state back in the direction that we actually need it. It isn't an active member. It's a neutral, passive part of our lives and our existence together, because we aren't so nice to each other. Now, one of the encouragements is the government coming in. The EFF comes out and says, wait a minute, this Patriot Act position, Patriot Act has not been challenged. There's provisions left and right in that were really no good, but nobody comes and challenges it, so it continues to exist in law. It's legal, but not lawful. If there is such a law, right? I mean, this is the other interesting problem. Because when you make it up, when you're a bunch of people that make it up as you go, you live in a lawless condition, and don't expect your property to be protected. The only one that can protect that property is you. And that means if you come down to you as a property, you better be able to protect yourself. And so you have to have these words in your mouth anyway. You may be fine up until the day you're not. And I see evidence every day of people who take what I offer, I'm talking minors now, in the field, who the stark difference between those that listen to what I'm saying for them to do for themselves to prepare for an imposition, and those that don't, it's stark. The distinction and difference that happens at the point of the field is just a stark difference. The one that doesn't understand certain things and doesn't have a word in their mouth, the proper word, gets run down like they would, and those that don't. It's pretty simple. That's just as I've explained. It's kind of neat to hear it back. So these people that just make stuff up and impose upon your life, we talked about the Davos destroyers last week, and we talked about their 1,700 jets. They're supposed to be fighting for carbon, the carbon poisoning of the earth. They started trying to stop it, and yet they want this carbon taxation to stop it also, and they'd fly 1,700 jets in. But as they started to find out, and they're starting to find out about what's coming down, see the so-called those people, the do-gooders who think that they're in control, they realize things are coming out of control. And just as a word of warning for you, I don't mean you don't run, because they are. You now, if they run, now you know you're in the right place, and you just need to buckle down. As inequality soars, the nervous super rich are already planning their escapes. So something's in the wind. They're going to take their jets and fly them to far-off places, and they're buying up these people that were at that Davos. They're supposed to be looking for social justice across the world for the weakest, the meekest about us that are being overtaken by all this first world nations. I don't know where those are because everyone's now a third world nation. We were when we entered into debt systems, but notwithstanding that, these people think that they have some place to fly to, and so they're buying these places up. Hedge fund managers are preparing getaways by buying airstrips and farms in remote areas, former hedge fund partner tells Davos during session in equality. With growing inequality and the civil unrest from Ferguson and the Occupy protests fresh in the minds of people, the world's super rich are already preparing for consequences. At a packed session in Davos, former hedge fund director Robert Johnson revealed that worried hedge fund managers were already planning their escapes. Quote, I know hedge fund managers all over the world who are buying airstrips and farms in places like New Zealand because they think they need a getaway. Now, interestingly, one of the congressmen in the United States has a property in New Zealand, and he's had it for years and years and years. It's funny, they can afford, these representatives of the people can afford all this. None of us can. So what do they know that's in the winds? So right after, in this Davos condition, they're actually looking at the ramifications of what's going on, and they fear you people, but they fear you in the capacity of you being chaotic and not organized, as I've been trying to suggest to you about what Ferguson could have done and what Occupy was never. I think this is partly an excuse, but the point is that they're talking about this amongst themselves, all these hypocrites that will argue that carbon dioxide is a poison, that you are the problem. They will fly their big jets in there, 1,700 jets into a place to try and discuss this, and they are concerned. They realize the pressure that they're causing is causing measures that they're going to have to start taking. Also understand it's a financial destruction. So this is what I've been saying for quite a long time. It's going to get wild, folks. If they want to pull the plug and we aren't aware as a people, and it looks like we're not aware as a people, this is a concern. It's going to get serious in a real short time. You see the effect. So be warned. They're telling themselves, these people that are in the seat of decision to control, bring international controls locally to you, they're concerned. My view on that is that means that you just get ready and you get the word out. You start making whatever, phone trees or make friends or find your enemies and make friends with them and point out a bigger problem coming and make suggestions as to alternatives. You don't have to say we got to do it. Just be ready to do it. Maybe practice things. Also, they say in Davos and these environmental criminals, an interesting little story popped up. Again, by the Pope. As I was thinking about that, he's embracing the religion. This is the head of the Catholic religion embracing another religion. I would have thought that everybody in that religion, not much different than what that German gentleman did. He said, "I'm no longer going to follow the Pope. I'm still a Christian, but I'm not a Catholic." For what the Pope did about embracing climate change, why wasn't he called out for a heretic in embracing a second religion? And I just want to reinforce the fact, because this is where they're going. This is not really the second religion. This is the same religion, just taking on a new mask. But it was interesting. I don't know if anybody heard about this, and I don't know exactly when that first thing happened, but there was a time here just last year or so, the Pope was releasing some doves. They always release these doves. They want to do the symbol of peace and all this. Well, one or two times, the seagulls, they go right after those doves, right coming out the window. They were attacking the doves. Seagulls were attacking the doves. The crows would attack the doves. Well, interesting little story pops up. And balloons replaced doves as a Vatican symbol of peace. Children visiting the Vatican released balloons instead of doves Sunday in a ritual that serves as a gesture of peace. The change follows an incident last year when doves released together by children and Pope Francis were attacked by 2 other birds, and a crow and a seagull. The Associated Press reports the episode created unwanted attention for the Pope, who is named for animal lover Francis of Assisi. If that isn't a symbol of the truth in nature, in natural law, I don't know what to say, folks. Go look up those 2 birds and go look up what the image there would be and the attack and the truth that's behind that. And boy, I guess religion's just party time now. If you don't think that they are concerned, that you don't see that type of a message being sent out again, that they went to balloons to represent peace, you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention, folks. It's what is underneath all of this. There's messages that come from some place I can't tell you that you're not going to refute. You're just not going to refute it. Their response to what happened is telling. So, I guess peace is represented by balloons. I just told you that in the United States of America, peace is represented by law, faithfully upheld. On the international front, as we continue, Grand Master Putin's trap. I have an admiration for how Putin is being the statesman in the world at this point, and what he's done to turn the Russian nation around. I don't necessarily understand everything. I don't understand how vile that he could be. I've never heard that he has been too much. There's been some reports talking about the man himself from people who are there, who are not Russians, who actually come from the United States, that will tell you that he's a pretty honorable guy. He's pretty honest, straightforward. In fact, there was a discussion that they can't find him have ever taken in all of his time, where everybody else, most everybody else in the positions that he has held, took bribes. He never did. So, just on the evidence, I'm going to presume him innocent until we can find a lot better guilt than the unsupported assertions by whomever is speaking vile. We have a very serious problem because of the stance that he's taken, notwithstanding the fact that the Western powers are wrong to start with in what they're doing. They're not coming back and resting in peace and only engaging where there's a literal attack, not a fabricated one. But they're playing a very dangerous game, and this gentleman in Putin is really doing a much better position. Accusations of the West towards Putin are traditionally based on the fact that he worked in the KGB, and therefore he is a cruel and immoral person. Putin is blamed for everything, but nobody ever accused Putin of a lack of intelligence. Any accusations against this man only emphasize his ability for quick analytical thinking and making clear and balanced political and economic decisions. We just talked about Greece, his extension to support in case they decide to pull from the EU. Often Western media compares this ability with the ability of a grand master conducting a public chess simulation. Recent developments in the United States economy and the West in general show us to conclude that this part of the assessment of Putin's personality, Western media are absolutely right. And so, in assessing what we're into with this with Putin, watch if you generally assume that that's correct, that there's no failure. And I've told you we're dealing with the United States of America with buffoons. We are in a serious disadvantage. Just to start right here, it's commonly understood he's not unintelligent. No, he's not. He's got it together, and his demeanor tells me a lot about that as well. He's dangerous, but to the extent that you don't want to walk in there and negotiate with this guy without having your game together at all. Despite numerous success reports in the style of Fox News and CNN today, Western economy led by the United States is in Putin's trap, the way out of which no one in the West can see or find, and the more the West is trying to escape from this trap, the more stuck it becomes. Sounds like the Chinese finger cuffs, doesn't it? It's the noose that gets tighter every time you squirm. Interestingly, Russia is working with China. And China just went over to Switzerland. And this thing is all being locked up. It's all being controlled for the good of those nations, counter to what the West is really wanting. And then you notice everything that the West turns, it's not gold anymore. And certainly they are not interested in the gold, but Russia is. What is truly tragic predicament of the West and the United States in which they find themselves, and why all the Western media and leading Western economists are silent about this, as well as guarded military secret. Let's try to understand the essence of current economic events in the context of the economy, setting aside the factors of morality, ethics, and geopolitics. And what I'd like to appreciate about this is you look at again, this is just the bean counting, straightforward, no worry about it, don't think about an attitude. You better look at the facts, at least as the numbers tell them to you. Now, we can do statistics and we can come up with all kinds of outcomes, but if you're being truthful, you're going to look for the right way to handle that. That Putin is creating something in the world right now, or helping to create something that's going to counter what the United States is doing, and it's not going to be very good, and that's for us, the people. And so as long as we sit quiet, I keep thinking how we can be, prepare. Well, they're this, as I told you, this is incremental and long. Once they impose this thing that comes down on us, and they have been, and we won't even have a say about the austerity that we're already living under, no one wants to recognize. It's going to go long term. It will outdo about everything that most people are set up for. That's only the ones that have actually prepared and have even a couple years worth of food. And so we're going to have anything you're prepared for has to be an interim stay that you have while you're working in real time to make it work for you as the pressure comes down. These are forces outside of us as people. And these are other people, the decision makers of other people that are doing it for their survival. And so I would suggest that given this gentleman is intelligent, and we find no intelligence in Washington, we had better look to Putin to decide: do we mirror what he does, or do we deny it and let the buffoons run our lives? And what is Russia doing but banning GMOs? They're going for gold. They're trading producer products for gold. They're trading for other producer products. They're not into the fiat. They have another alternative fiat system within a closed group of people that they'll be using amongst themselves, which also has a tangible connection to the West. The so-called petrodollar is seeing its last days, and you either notice that, or your future is going to be tough. It's just going to be tough. As I was saying before, there was a Russia report about Putin. It was written by Sharon Tennyson. I read it. It was interesting. I appreciate, given that she's telling us the truth, I appreciated the insight about this guy. It just reminded me, if this guy is intelligent and he's a chess master, you better start following his moves. Now, you can't win his game following his moves, but in this case, when you're just following his moves, you're not going to be, we're not talking about being on the same chessboard. But if you're playing someone else who's as much as a buffoon as who he's playing, you're going to win that game. You may not win against him, but you're going to win the guy that you're up against, which is your own government. So do you match the moves at Putin, admittedly intelligent, or do you follow the moves of a buffoon? That seems to be and criminals, I guess. Buffoons and criminals. To me, it's an interesting insight. I tell you, the mirror of what's happening over on the other side of the Atlantic as us. There's another thing that goes on here that I may have mentioned. I don't remember if I did or not, but I'll mention it now as it strikes me. As I said, we are using the Middle East as a mirror. What the government of the United States is willing to do to those people over there, they're doing to the people in the United States. Is also, if you will, and I will speak more, maybe more toward what Solomon would tell us from Brazilistan, that we're looking at our own evil, our own fallen nature. We're looking at our dark side in looking at the reflection of what other people are doing against us. We shouldn't be looking. The fact that we would call Putin a negative when everyone admits he's intelligent and he's at least fair for his people. should tell us something about how wrong we are to accept that and not look at ourselves as the problem. So you can look at that same mirror, and that mirror that I was saying, what happens over there is what happens over here, is also reflecting how dark we are. That's what we really need to be focusing on to stop here. And it really does boil down to each one of us. Because, again, as they'll tell us, we allow it. We allow it in so many ways. So, there's a couple ways to look at the metaphor of the mirror. And I want us to know that the people that are running the show at this point, all of them, they're really dark, soulless. As Solomon, as the word soulless comes, they're just soulless. You don't whatever that is in your mind, that you can't have a soul of any goodness and intend this on other people, that they have to respond to you this way. Remember, I talked to you about that a long time ago. That's just a trespass. It's a violation just to cause someone to respond to your nonsense. And once I saw that, I see that. I don't care. To me, the words and the labels are just really, they just might as well be heaped on the one who's levying them, right? Because they're the trespasser now, yelling and screaming at the one that they want to blame, vilify, when in fact to try and get you to believe that they're correct. And so, there's an acknowledged intelligent guy in Putin that I've been asking you, at least follow his moves. If he buys gold, maybe you should. For your daily things, you should buy silver. I'm really talking more in coins so that the government can't take them from you so easily. Or become a miner and they can't take it from you either. But notwithstanding that, he's making commodity-based decisions. I told you this a long time ago. If you're in commodity-based economies, notwithstanding the speculatory type problem with it, a substance for substance, you're going to be in a lot better condition than if you don't. And you see Putin is actually doing that. So, to that extent, I think he has something to tell us on his own. And don't look through the faulty, distorted mirror that's placed that we don't realize in all this transparency, we don't see that that's us. Ran across another article, not sure what I feel about it, but it was on point enough that it was just thought-provoking enough that I thought maybe you want to know about it. It's called The Overthrow of the American Republic. Now, see, to me, all these discussions are after the fact, but people are seeing it. And the gentleman that's writing this, Thomas Mick, he brings out right off the bat, 18 USC 2384, seditious conspiracy, and you can read that when you get this link. And I think it's important, again, read the black and white, so you can see there's laws. There's supposed to be laws that keep the peace that are not being enforced at this point. That's up to us. And that he points out that the reason arrests are not being made is because those with the authority and proximity to the criminals are themselves the criminals. As, again, an acknowledgement of in a way, not directly, but our lawsuit said the people in the seat of decisions are criminals. We alleged an interference with the Republican form of representative government. That's treason. That's making war on the laws of the United States. So our lawsuit that we put in, that those that are criminals, again, it's like going to a bank robber and just asking them if they'll stop robbing the bank. That's not going to go over too good. They'll laugh in your face. So you have to have a continued persistence. But he points out here, I guess that was what the point for me was, he now states, if you didn't know, that there's criminals in the offices, and these laws are right here to point that out. And there's he has an interesting discussion that I thought you might want to see as a link to go read some information. He has another action plan. He calls it the action plan. I have a little bit of problems with it. You can find that out and search it. You can think about that. And my point is on this is that we start looking at each other's thoughts about this if we have no other thoughts on where we might all see the problem and what might be available that we can do about it. Because if we have no memory in us of what we should be doing, we have no future. It just seems so clear to me. And only from the mining law. If I hadn't had the memory given to me by research and interest, to see what we had forgotten up until now, and literally yanked it out of the fire at the last moment to at least still be here. Because 10 years ago when I started, this was like within a year or two of being disregarded and completely trounced. We're still flying with it. We're extricating it from the fire like the phoenix in a way. We're pulling it out though. It's not flying on its own because we found the criminals are in the offices. And so I found this to be a very interesting article, at least in discussion. Like I said, I always have your own mind about certain things because at some point we're going to have to come to terms with this overthrow. I've told you it happened a long time ago. It came in a lot of different ways and a lot of different steps. Just pick one. I don't even talk about it too much as far as to these people that are the criminals. I just point out where they're the criminals. We point out the objective basis. It goes beyond opinion. I'm not going to be guilty of fabricating some false authority myself. I'm going to be producing the authority that was in the one that is now not creating essentially a fiduciary breach. There's not much answer they can have to that, actually. And where we assert that and don't let them pull us off, that it tends to slowly be that another paddle you throw in behind that freighter, that ship of state that really wants to go into the iceberg. As we say, the police state, as we say, the martial law, the prison that you live in. I wanted to point your attention to just how it's being done. You have to, and my thought on this is you have to see more of, it's not because I don't want to point out all the wrong the cops do. That's endless. I guess for me it's about letting you know the surprise type of attacks that are done on you. So when you see these, you're not surprised in the moment and the surprise defeats you. It's like a surprise attack. You're overwhelmed and not practiced. Just by the sheer existence of that thing in that way, that whatever's coming. That video, you can watch how this works. Seattle police jail elderly military veteran for walking in Seattle while black. In quotes, walking in Seattle while black. Now, they've turned this to a racist condition. This could happen to anybody. It may not actually happen to someone who wasn't white or black, but I don't know because we only see one instance. However, you'll see on video what the cops will do to lie in order to set you up. And I'm really glad they didn't shoot this guy because she was setting him up to shoot him. And one other thing I wanted to call your attention to, when you watch the video, and you'll get the link later, post-production in the Blogcaster page, he steps out of the side of the camera. It's a gentleman standing on the corner, getting ready to walk across the street. He's got a golf club in his hand, using it as a cane. He's been doing this for 20 years, he says. And this cop car, I want you to notice something. The very first few seconds, she makes a left turn. I want you to notice that. Because her claim is that he had taken this, at some point, he had taken this club and swung it at her car. And then I wanted to ask you the question, when you go back to the first few seconds, if she makes a left-hand turn and he's 70 years old, he's just walking just patiently, slowly, as he would of being a 70, using a golf club as a cane. He's standing there on the street corner waiting for the light, so he's been there for quite a few minutes. You look at the distance she had to travel to find him again on the street corner, and you notice that left-hand turn she takes in the beginning to realize she just wasn't going around the block to find him. And she blames him for swinging this at her. And she's really wanting to set him up for the takedown. My problem with this also is that he walks out of the front of the camera. I'm asking you, be cognizant of the camera. Be in the frame all the time. However, he ends up getting put in jail. And they justify it. And my problem with this is I don't think that people appreciate the surprise that you can get jumped on over. Now, I will hope that he pursues this and sues them. I don't know what else to do about that. You're not going to do more. But this was what can you tell him? It's a criminal cop. And it may very well that she did that because he's a black man. And to me, all that doesn't matter that he was a veteran either, although we can make all that together. The point is that it doesn't matter his color. It doesn't matter where he's come back from and through in life. She's lying. And I want to focus on that instead of what we are. It's shameful on top of it, certainly, if she's done it for those reasons, but I don't think you're ever going to get that out. And she never uses the word of racial discrimination. That's the other problem. They know to do this. They're smart that way. That I'm a little concerned as we see all these things, we kind of we get desensitized as how to one day we might be approached. And we're not, just because we're not in Seattle walking down the street means we can't get it. Again, you just go in your cars, folks, as you're going to be, you want to see how to deal with that, what's on the internet, you'll find out how fast that's not going to work for you, to think that that's not going to happen to you just because you're not in Seattle. So, it's detestable what the cops do. I guess I'm going to rail another point on the advocacy of this. This is a policy problem. Those of you everywhere need to look at this and say, hey, listen, I just walk into your police department or send an email and say, I just ran across this video where this cop does this, says these things. What is your policy about cops lying? What is your policy about people being stopped without a probable cause? What is your policy about a fabricated probable cause? And you start integrating yourself to protect yourself ahead of time administratively. I have been bringing, and I have to give you this one because I may have been advising slightly wrong, where we're telling you demand the right to counsel and then shut up. You're going to have to know a whole lot more, because it just came down in San Francisco. Cops arrest the public defender for refusing to let them interrogate her client without counsel. So she had the attorney there, and that wasn't good enough. And so you have to know you don't have to testify. You take the fifth, and then you demand your counsel again. Now, I don't know how this is going to turn out. I don't know what they're making up a reason why they had the right to arrest the attorney. Again, that all has to be challenged. You have to be aware that this is the skullduggery that they're pulling to defeat you. And if you're not aware, in the moment you're surprised. See, now that I see this, I have a thought. I can develop a thought about how I might have to handle that. I haven't really had a time to settle it down to kind of let you know insight on what I would think. Some things came to mind, but most of it is you just learn that you have the right to remain silent. And if they take your attorney away, or they don't give you one, certainly in this case, now they have made it so she can't talk. Or the guy can't talk, because now he can't have his attorney because they just put her in jail. So be aware of the tactics the military, in the form of a police, are doing. You have to now look at these things as an education for the tactics that they're using to try to get around you. It's partly what I do behind Woodshed all the time. I just bring these things not to tell them to you. There's nothing I'm going to tell you that you can't find yourself. It's maybe the insights I bring, the importance why they're out there for us to see. What you might say, how you might respond to keep yourself separate. The FBI plans to collect everyone's DNA, just got a huge boost from Congress, was another story here. Very important, very serious. They're trying, they want to get your DNA. They wanted to put them all into these biometric databases, go national, the national ID. They want the real ID all pressed on you. There's another story, I don't know if I have it up, I'll see here in a second, about enforcing real ID or you don't travel. That's a rule, that's a regulation you can challenge right now. I think it's ripe to be done so. I won't talk about the points of it here right now because I'm working on this problem that they are claiming that Congress can order your DNA through the states, and they usually give incentives, and they'll require that they've now required that on a misdemeanor they can take your DNA because the court says that in this case, and they'll rely on a court case, which I do have the link for, that once you're involved, once you're taken in, you don't have the same rights now. The one thing, though, if you look very carefully, it's not over, actually. And it's something I did when I was going to do my child services, child abuse, pedophilia documentary, 10, 12 years ago, and they caught me up and they put me away for a few weeks. I essentially did this kind of a challenge there. They wanted my name. I wouldn't give it. I was doing everything I could do to stave off their jurisdiction. I wouldn't give them my fingerprints, nothing. And so it occurs to me that this is still available, and you have to know that. If you don't want your biometric data given, you have to have a word in your mouth about why. So let me go to the court case they cite, because that's really not the story that they come by. They're telling you they're going to get your DNA. Now it's up to you. You're required now to be able to know what the standard is. And I went to the court case that they say, they point out. It's a link. I'll give you that link as well ahead, so there's no excuse not to be able to see it for yourself. Go down to the holding. It's called held. The holding. That's usually the most important part of the case. Now, it's relative to the facts of the case, but here we are. It's a general principle, not principle, it's a general opinion or a policy decision, because there's really no law here. Here's what's held. And I want to point out, when I read it, I want to point out where your defense is to challenge the whole point of whether or not they can actually take the DNA, notwithstanding the law. Because the Supreme Court, as they did in the ignorance is okay to get you stopped and seized, but not enough to search you. It's kind of like this. So, held, when officers make an arrest supported by probable cause to hold a serious offense and bring the suspect to the station to be detained in custody, taking and analyzing a cheek swab of the arrestee's DNA is like fingerprinting and photographing, a legitimate police booking procedure that is reasonable under the Fourth Amendment. So, what were the big points here? Well, the Fourth Amendment's being resorted to, so that's a standard, and they bring what the standard is as reasonable. And so that's one thing. You may find that it's not reasonable. The court has now found the taking of DNA is reasonable once you're in custody. So let's jump over to the custody. What is the parameter for the lawfulness of the custody? But probable cause. And a serious offense. So you have to know, in this case, when they're coming after you for all these things, if all your initial defenses have not worked and they keep wanting to make an issue of you, and they really want that DNA, they could care less about the rest of it. They're just making this database. They just want to set it up into some minority report condition. All that. It's big data. They just want a control on the whole of everything that's going on. But probable cause. Until you get an order from a court that's been explained all the way through that they have probable cause, and it's lawful. And if they say that you do at the first court, you have to have a stay of the execution of that order based on a quality defense that the court may have made an error on. That until it's lawfully determined, not surmised that there's probable cause, but lawfully determined, and you can throw all your jurisdictional defenses into this as well, they don't have the right to take DNA. And so when you're in there or you get sucked up and they want to get your DNA, you quote this standard. And you challenge that. And you do that through, you say, I want my lawyer, and I want them, and the basic challenge I am making to you, that is, there's no judgment in law stating that you do have probable cause. And then they say, well, yeah, we have the warrant, we have this, or we have that. Well, I'm challenging the veracity of the statements on that warrant. I'm challenging that you've created a fraud in order to get the jurisdiction. That's a felony. So, despite, as I tell you, look for the exceptions, look for the conditions of the standards. This is one. I guess there's more I could go and discuss here and there. It's probably not conducive for this broadcast, and for the most part, no one's going to, you'll remember what you remember. You'll be banging your head, trying to remember what I said one day if it ever happens. The point is, I want you to understand that there's nothing complete and certain. There's always this angle that you pull, this avoidance that you draw to not allow this oppression. You keep sticking it back in their face as much as you possibly can. Will it guarantee anything? Well, I don't think so. But you're setting yourself up, because if they did it wrong, you can be the stick that teaches them that they better not. You can be the one that challenged the policy that denounced and denied and destroyed your right to challenge whether or not they had probable cause, and they get their policies changed that way. That's the hard way, though. See, I'd rather work ahead and call your local sheriff and your police and work together with one same thing on any, if you're in a city and a county, you work to make sure that the policy of this challenge is written into the policy book, that they can't take your DNA until they have a judgment in law that has been exhausted. That's the best way to put that. So it's while you're appealing, they're not going to get that. And then there's no reason to hold you if they have other information to identify you. And that's the other thing they'll throw on you, because they have a way to identify you to collect you back up. You can always be ordered back in, and there's no evidence that you wouldn't come in once they have proven by the Supreme Court has decided that in fact probable cause existed. So a lot what I just said, but it's sticking. It's just putting sticks in the gears of their machine all the time. Never give up. Never stop. It's the only thing we really have. That in a way, you live in the tyranny. What else are you going to do? You might as well just stick it. Just make it as difficult. As I said, gum up the system. You get a traffic ticket, fight it. Go find other people with traffic tickets have a basic understanding about that, and go have everybody start fighting it. Gum up the works. And in the meantime, you're looking for ways to stop all that nonsense. Police response to bill restricting no-knock raids. You can't have both freedom and security. That's what they're responding to. Bill to restrict no-knock raids. First of all, as a title, Georgia lawmakers have proposed a bill aptly named Baby Bow's Law that would restrict the issuance of no-knock raids. Well, that was one of the suggestions I've made. If you have these no-knock conditions, step up, go to the legislative representative if you can't do it yourself, and have them put a bill in that constrains the general authority to do whatever they want and focuses down the limits. Because these people aren't that smart to know what those limits are. We're going to have to step up to do it. And so, but here's how dumb the response is. They don't live in a world that says they can be restrained, so when you try to, they call you out on it. This shows you you're not under the law. You're under an attitude. You're under a despotism. You can't have both freedom and security. Well, they changed the question. We're not caring about that. We won't want you killing our people on no-knock raids. We don't want you to have carte blanche, no-knock access. We want you to be civilized. And if you could just tell the cops that, they might start having to think about what they're actually doing. Now, I don't know the limit on this, but they're putting, what is that, Benjamin Franklin made that statement? Something about those of who would give up the essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty or safety. Now, it's different context a bit, but really not. You don't let them frame the argument. You can have both. What does freedom and security have to do with somebody, a policing agency that has that does have probable cause that they can't wait for? That they can't wait. Where's this stuff? Where's all the evidence going? What, down the toilet? Is that what they're really worried about? That's usually not how they enforce these things. So you have something to say. The attitude of the cops to say you can't have both freedom and security may be what gives you the license to say, yes, we can, and we're going to prove it to you. So now we're going to make a different type bill that shows you that that's the fact, the law that you have to follow, cops. It's up to us, folks, is I guess the point here. But you come forward with the law. If you have to do representative, or you might be able to do it by initiative or referendum. Initiative is where you initiate it on your own, people getting the signatures. Referendum is where an argument, where something is referred to the people by the legislature or by a challenge to a law that was put in. Now, for the most part, that's a lot of work. I don't mean from getting the referendum on. I mean keeping up with all the bad unconstitutional bills that fly through at thousands a year. That's what we tried to do. I mean, we thought maybe if we asserted what the law was, that people would be honorable and honest and representative to their fiduciary, and we found out that they were not. So we realized very quickly that of this 4,000 bills that went in the year we engaged over the few that 20 or 30 that came through for mining that was interfering, we realized that was not going to work. It doesn't mean a bill or two can't be imposed, challenged in the right amount. I think it's 90 days after a bill comes out and becomes law that you can put it on for referendum to the vote of the people. If you're not doing that, you're missing a tool. I found an interesting article talking about the Benjamin Franklin discussion about whether you're giving up safety to deserve liberty nor safety if you give up one for the other. Interesting discussion was his analysis was that it's improperly applied. In the way I'm doing it, I don't think so. But I thought it would be interesting for you to realize that on the internet you get lots of things stated in certain ways in the wrong context or the misstatement of the quote. You certainly don't see the big major context. And he provides the context by showing the fuller discussion that I thought was interesting just for you to read in order that you see how to better analyze things and how to better put things into context and proper application. And not a lot of that is espoused on the internet, as I see that people believing that they have the opinion and this is what it is. That's why I try to tell you to go to a lot of different places and sources and try to go to those source documents. More importantly, and maybe solely, you can look around for other people's opinions, but make sure that they're compared to your best attempt to understand it in the proper context, purpose, interest, intent, objective, all that kind of neat stuff that comes to bear upon this. Another point about this police state that we live in and just exposing certain things. When cops break bad inside a police force gone wild, this is out of Albuquerque. Grimner, be careful. I think you already know that down there. Looking west of the scrub and boulders of the Saudi Sandia Mountains, the city of Albuquerque, New Mexico, sprawls across the valley of Rio Grande, surrounded by the vast openness of the high desert. On the city's eastern edge, the winding road and cul-de-sacs of Tony subdivisions in the northeast heights abruptly give way to the foothills of the mountains, whose sharp red peaks tower over the city. On the afternoon of March 16, 2004, Albuquerque police received a 911 call from this part of town, and a man complaining that someone was illegally camping in the foothills. 2 Albuquerque officers responded, and sure enough, encounters James Matthew Boyd, a 38-year-old homeless man who suffered from schizophrenia. Boyd was clearly not well, ranting, telling police that he was not an agent for the Defense Department. Now, that didn't go well. It was a petty misdemeanor for camping had it been, properly done. And he ends up getting shot down dead. Now, this all becomes, again, a policy problem. I understand, if I'm correct, that this Albuquerque, New Mexico is already underneath the scrutiny of an order to not be for civil rights violations. And it apparently is not enough. And so this is where people have to step up. And the problem with not doing that is you could be the next victim. And they'll make, again, as we see, any excuse about how this is, about the condition. They justify their tyranny against you. And a lot of it's that justification is not challenged. And so your silence is their victory in this silent war against us. It's kind of on and on. It gets nuttier and nuttier. Cops going after kids shoveling snow. The cops want their cut. Okay, believe it or not, this really shows how the new younger generation of police are anti-society and just insanely pro-government beyond common sense. Well, I'll stop reading, but that's the point. It's gone beyond common sense. It's beyond common reason. There's no reason to this stuff. What's the problem with shoveling snow? What you're admitting here is that the government is a big organized criminal, right? Organized crime. You don't pay us what we want, and we're going to come break your needs. Actually, we're going to execute you. How's that? These are happening more and more because people stay silent because apparently they believe they have no force and effect. They're using this fiscal problem, the bankruptcies, to justify this. That's no reason, folks. And yet we sit here and we allow it. In other words, if you go out as some kid, it's just like the lemonade stand. And I don't know if this is connected to that FRN or not. I mean, there hasn't been a reason why. They just say they get to do it. You can't go. They deem it a business to go around. To me, it was hobby money. It was just what you did. In fact, you were encouraged to go around and help people for a quarter or a dollar. Boy, a dollar would have been a lot for me. I mean, that was a lot of money. Well, you were happy to get the quarter. You rake up leaves. You pick up stuff. You'd pile up debris. Haul out the garbage for someone who couldn't. And you really didn't even, in fact, I didn't even really go and add. It wasn't like a job. It was just something you did, and they handed you money for it. Maybe that's the answer. Maybe you have to go in and say, well, no, I didn't do it. This is a gift to me. I'm not doing a business. And then you have to rely on the goodness of the people in your neighborhood to wink at you, and everybody understands what the condition with the oppression is. Maybe that's one of the elements of the things that you now advertise around. Listen, they're making a business out of this. Our community is one of gifts. But this is the insanity that starts to happen. The tyrant knows no bounds. The silence is their license. And you can't even, snow, you can't even enjoy yourself with snow. New Rochelle police officer holds teens at gunpoint over a snowball fight. You can't even have a snowball fight, and it's a problem. In a video uploaded by New Rochelle's Talk of the Sound, a New York police officer can be seen holding several teens at gunpoint after being called out for a disturbance, which turned out to be a snowball fight earlier this week. These people called cops are not intelligent enough to observe there's nothing going on. Would this guy get hit by the snowball during a snowball fight when he was young? But this is again what happens. These are your guards. These are the people that determine your life, and they determine your death. And you need to, those of you that are around and are in this, you need to go see this. You take this story, you go down to your local police and say, I want to see your snowball fight policy. You don't have one? Well, now I want you to have one. And when you see a snowball fight and no one's complaining about being attacked, how about you just keep on going? How about that's the policy? Because we don't want you putting yourself in a position where you give one of your cops the excuse to kill any of our kids or adults. You see how ridiculous it starts to become? But when you start doing that, what kind of a pressure you put on the system to have to keep up with it? You won't be reasonable. We'll make sure your policies say you have to be reasonable, because we can't afford to not have that written down, because we can't afford to lose one more of our people in our town. Enough is enough. If you're going to rely on the Supreme Court saying it's the policy, and you're going to rely on your policy, well, then we're going to rewrite your dang policy. How's that? We'll start here. And if you really want to roll your sleeves up, you do it by chapters. You present the whole plan, and you fight them, and you sue them for not doing reason. You say this is not reason. Here's the examples around the country. Here's what this is a same defect. We want it fixed. We don't want mistakes, because you're not capable of thinking on your feet in real time, making common sense decisions. The Supreme Court says that the people that you're sending out are not smart enough, not for what we're looking at, because these people are dying when we don't give you this guidance. This is on us, folks, as we do this. I can see very clearly that this is a non-risky way of starting to impose ourselves. I hear lots of stuff going on, and a lot of ideas about, fun ideas about being effectual, and this is my opinion, and this is what I want to do. I hardly see a lot of any people talking about what they just did in order to effect that. To me, now that we're seeing case after case come down with respect to the policy rules, I said the police rules. The policy is more important than your life. You have a very direct answer now to say that's one thing we need to focus on, because that policy means my potential life or death. And if not me, a loved one. And in places that we may have never, ever understood. We walk ourselves into something that's supposed to be protective of us or for us, and it ends up killing us, and it's based on some grammatical discussion on a piece of paper instead of actual reality for its justification. When did we go there, folks? When did that happen? I can't tell you when it happened because I got surprised that it was all doing it. It had to slap my face, get the rose-colored glasses off my face, so I didn't see it. I can see it now. I can see how they've been doing it. Every day they tell us how it's being done. That's why it's a little bit frustrating that upon these points we don't take the bull by the horns and become a nuisance, in a way, a good nuisance. These people don't want us in their face. They don't want the citizens' committees, if you will, if I can use the word citizens in a more proper way. They don't want us oversight. They said, well, you have to have citizens oversight. Well, you have it, folks. It's in your contention and challenge of a policy that can go bad. And you use the examples of everywhere else to say that we're not going to allow that a mistake to happen here. We can't trust you now. We lost the trust. In other words, remember, you can just rely on the unqualified one. Obama said, if you can't trust the government, we're going to have trouble. That's the authority you use. We can no longer trust the government. We are having to take control of this. We have a problem. That's not our problem. That's your problem. I've solved our problem. I'm going to make a snowball chapter change to this policy. You will not you will not engage people having a snowball fight with weaponry. You will not put yourself in what you believe to be harm's way. Absent an attack on someone who needs your help, you keep going. That's the policy. How absurd that we even have to talk about this. And it gets worse. People you put yourself in trust to, you think are helping out, no different than the government, little extensions on the government in a very serious manner. To collect debts, nursing homes are seizing control over patients. Control, the word control is a possession, is a property word. Lillian Palermo tried to prepare for the worst possibilities of aging. An insurance executive with a PhD in psychology and a love of ballroom dancing, she arranged for her power of attorney and listen to the list of things you have to have anymore, and you're still apparently not protected. The power of attorney and a healthcare proxy to go to her husband, Dino, 8 years her junior, if she became incapacitated, and in the 80s she did. Mr. Palermo, who was a lead singer in the Midtown nightclubs in the 60s, when her elegant tango first caught his eye, now regularly rolls his wife's wheelchair to the piano at the Catholic nursing home in Manhattan, where she ended up in 2010 as dementia, falls, and surgical complications took their toll. He sings her favorite songs, feeds her home-cooked Italian food, and pays a private aide to be there when he cannot. But one day last summer, after he disputed a nursing home bill that had suddenly doubled Mrs. Palermo's co-pays and complained about the inexperienced employees who dropped his wife on the floor, Mr. Palermo was shocked to find a 6-page legal document waiting for her on the bed. It was a guardianship petition filed by the nursing home, Mary Manning Walsh, asking the court to give a stranger full power, legal power over Mrs. Palermo, now 90, and complete control of her money. Now, you can read this. This is a very serious encroachment that's been going on for at least 10 or 15 years that I know about it. I understand this because I was given I took the obligation to care for a woman who's 92 years old, the daughter of which had to leave the country. The properties of which that she had, I had to also caretake. That as soon, and I was given all these powers, all these things to do to take care of this whole setup in lieu of the owner actually and the daughter being in the country to be able to take care of herself. And it wasn't 2 months, and the government was all over me over this stuff. They want the properties, they want you to control, and it's not to actually take care. The state is coming to steal this stuff. You need to know about this. This is despite all her paperwork, there's provisions that the government can do that you need to know are there. And you need to be able to anticipate them. All right? This is another color of authority felony going on that no one calls out. That if you're unaware, the surprise attack. Now, Mr. Palermo here, he's now having to put money out of the estate in order to defend against this, just so he can live with his wife, despite the so-called legalisms that are in place. And so those of you that are coming into this time, or those that you're going to have to be the ones, the guardians that you thought you were, and you realize these laws are there, you have to start moving to have them changed. At minimum, put some due process findings before a court that's impartial. And the problem is how is a state who's a real party of interest impartial when they use their own dang judge? That should tell you we're in a big problem. But I saw that story, sad story, sad attack, and you realize that was the Catholic home, right? So they're not above criminality. They're not above not caring. It's a business. It's the bottom line, folks. This is the world we find ourselves in, the administrative financial construct. And despite and because of the continuing fraud within the system, the criminals in the system, as we point off the overthrow of the United States, the criminals are in the seat of decision. We saw the other article, what our lawsuit's pointing out. Found out by a judge. Clinton appointed judge accuses seven Obama holder DOJ attorneys for fraud. In a newly unsealed court ruling, Judge Francis Alegria, who was appointed by the Democratic President Bill Clinton in 1998, is accusing, I don't know why that's important, folks, but there it is. Who cares? These judges are supposed to be impartial. It's not supposed to matter, but you know they carry this political baggage with them wherever they go, don't they? So that's a fraud right up there. It's a fraud of omission to have of telling you that it shouldn't matter, and that it does. In accusing seven Obama holder Department of Justice attorneys for fraud upon the court, and notified Eric Holder that they are banned from his courtroom. Legal experts are saying the move is extremely rare, if not unprecedented. So here's the proof of how rare and how criminal the system has allowed itself, that it has, in 40 years of legal practice, government and private, I've never seen that done, said David Hardy, a constitutional law expert who formerly worked in the United States Solicitor General's office. That's where I wanted to point and end it right there. You can read the story for yourself. 40 years of unchecked fraud upon the court. Fraud upon the court is I'll read it to you if I just remembered. It's in the article. In the judge's accusations, you don't even hear my opinion. The judge's accusations against the DOJ, lawyers are as bringing a fraud upon the court. Now, this is not fraud. This is fraud upon the court. Now, here's what that is and entails. You have to have these 5 points. You just don't claim it. You have to then declare the 5 points. And this is what they are. And I can tell you this probably happens in every case I've seen in the last 10 years for sure, if you know what you're looking for. Lawyers bringing fraud upon the court. The judge cites the Sixth Circuit's definition. The part of an officer of the court. 2, that is directed to the judicial machinery itself. The judicial machinery. It's not just fraud. It's a corruption of the machinery. The first rules of to do justice speedily, and just doing justice should be good enough. You know, that's like justice is like one of the top lines of all our important documents. But it's directed to the machinery, that the fraud that's been done is directed to the machinery itself. Number 3, that is intentionally false, willfully blind to the truth, or is in reckless disregard for the truth. 4, that is positive averment or is concealment when one is under a duty to disclose, and 5, that does deceive the court. Now let me get back to number 4. Isn't that the positive averment or concealment when one is under a duty to disclose, the color of authority felony for interfering with rights, property, or interests or remedies, where you disclose or don't disclose that something's a fraud or the truth. So that's a restatement of the extortion, theft by extortion, essentially, directed to the machinery of the court. So there's your definition. He's saying the way that you remedy this apparently is only that they can't act in his court. Now, I guess that could be pretty good when they have a requirement that they can't, if they don't answer, they concede. But the problem is, I don't know if the court would work it that way. Here, though, is a judge finally getting fed up and said, listen, I've had it. That's it. The record indicates that there is much more involved here than a simple misstatement of facts, a fraudulent filing, or a failure to advise the court of a critical fact. Rather, it appears that there is significant evidence that the defendant's conduct may actually have subverted the judicial process. So, those are 3 exceptions that they would come back if you asserted fraud on the court and gave these 5 points of how you thought it was. They would come back probably and say, well, this was just a misstatement of the fact. It would be a fraudulent filing or failure to advise a court of a critical fact. That would be a fact, or it won't. It may be an excuse, as this judge found. So, the things that we hear that you can do have standards, is I guess the point I want to make with this. There's judges that are out there. They're not having it. This is evidence to you that you can use in your cases, especially if it's a defendant. Say, look, you got the DOJ for the United States and you're a federal court case. These people here are just criminals. I don't trust you taking this case with them as a party. They have shown that I can't trust them. And Obama says if I can't trust the government, we have a problem. Now, I want to know, is I'm going to have a problem? Are you going to impose this crime on me? Or are you going to have a problem where you're not supposed to impose the fraud on me? Now what I've just done is I've just put the onus on the judge. He's not going to be a felon if he doesn't explain it correctly. So, the point is it going to mean anything? I don't know. But it's a whole lot more than standing there and taking it, it seems to me. You take the facts of someone else and you assume authority without analyzing it? Or do you step up with some facts, some 5 points in your mind, or 3 points, whatever the elements are to prove the response to a condition of crime against you? The trespass on the case would be another one right here, it seems to me. You just have to state the cause and then give the elements, and that's it. That's a complaint. If the judge acts in conspiracy, you got him involved in conspiracy. Conspiracy for theft by extortion. He's not immune to that. So you have these statements to be made. These are applicable to lesser people, if I can put it that way. But this police state is running based on a bunch of information that's not challenged. Moving over to something that came across the links was an issue getting to gun control. Was an interesting video you can watch. It's called Number One with a Bullet. And it's another way to look at all this. And the basic premise of this is, despite all the propaganda about guns mean death, in this case, I think it was evidencing Plano, Texas. Apparently, it's known to be a gun central. Everybody there has multiple guns, and they have the lowest death rate of all the nation. They also point out that the average of the United States, if placed in context, is only that high because of the 10 major metropolises that have gun control. Otherwise, the United States would be at the bottom of the list, not anywhere close, and they aren't near the top either. Again, the facts against the police imposition that they're in danger, the facts against the government's imposition that they're in danger, the fact that when you take responsibility, and this is in this case for self-defense, not going to the point of altering or abolish the government, but just self-defense, and take that responsibility, that you are better situated and more successful than anyone around you, including the cops. This is some evidence, an argument you can propose to say Well, your cops may have a policy of being feared for their life, but they don't have the right to be feared for their life just because someone has the right to bear arms and does so. Again, I'm trying to show you take these things as tools, these things that come out on the internet. They can be thought, reduce them down to a presentation supporting a point that is not recognized in policies, rules, or codes. And you, the people, go and assert that failure, correct the failure, find that wrong, make it right. Again, I can just offer tools. I just see them all over the place. I really, in a way, I just think about that. I get kind of excited in the first instance, but then I get disappointed in myself. I see exactly what I'd want to do if I could be everywhere all over the place. But I can't be. And I have the attitude, and maybe you're different, and you could be. I mean, there's some, discretion maybe be the better part of valor, where you understand, some of this stuff may not be, why waste your time? Well, I don't know that I think it's to the point in the police state, the military state, we got no time to waste. No matter what you do, you can't be silent. So I'm kind of giving my own license here to say, no, we have to be doing something. And I can see a lot of stuff just to muck up the works. Now, your idea of fun may not be to muck up the works, but that's what's killing us. That's what's oppressing us. And at this point, when I go out and I'm going to be attacked by surprise, I think I'd rather take the strategy and tactic that I'll set the stage of my attack on my terms, on a place that I have strategized that they are very, very weak and they cannot prevail. And then I go to town. And if you do that a couple times, I can only suggest to you, you create a bearing for you, a presence for yourself. Your way becomes a little bit better stepped because they know you're coming with substance, and you start to be able to move things a little bit quicker. You've influenced people to understand you're coming in the right, the law, the truth that is in the situation, and you will prevail. And they had better just take you seriously. So that becomes you clear the road. It takes a lot of work to clear it. We do this all the time. There's a trail. It gets overgrown. We clear it because we have the right of maintenance. We clear it, and that's a lot of work. But once you get that path cleared and open, it's home free. And that's kind of how this situation works. So I'm trying to bring all these tools to show you can take even these evidences on the YouTube, qualify them for the truth, and apply the presentation to someplace local to fix that problem that you're noticing is being encroached and destroyed. And you use the presentation to destroy anybody with a lesser thought as well. Interesting little thing came through, the cognitive dissonance, it burns. I think Gary L. twittered out, I think, a website. It was for the Modern Patriot. Excuse me. Let me see, I've got to go over here. Modern Mommy Patriot. I have been on the record a bit critical of Adam Kokesh. However, it's not set in stone. I think he does an excellent job in the video that she presents on her website, talking about this movie that came out, The American Sniper. I think the way he goes about asking the questions and watching people's the absence of actual knowledge in people, but their action despite their knowledge, and their action despite them actually sensing a difference, is a very excellent presentation of a problem. I think he does a good job. I think he puts I'm a little put off on the people who push the fallacy argument instead of doing the argument, who try to stand as an elite understanding of what's critical thinking by putting out and forward the fallacies, the arguments, and things like that. He doesn't do that, yet you hear him apply the points, and I thought it was an excellent way for you to understand, a very neat way to apply this to people that don't understand what's going on, to get your point out, to at least short circuit the cognitive dissonance that's been created in our people. So in a way, I have to give kudos to Kokesh on this. I thought he did a fairly decent way. His insights and reframing the reality, actually stating the reality instead of framing it due to the propaganda that someone is agreed to, is an interesting insight that I appreciate, that I want you all to kind of look at. If you can find that link, it's the called The Cognitive Dissonance It Burns is the title of the article. Just put out here yesterday, I think it was, The Modern Mommy Patriot. I'll give you a link later, but this information that's wrong, that we live under, that people act on, they vilify, or they make heroes out of people that really aren't worthy in that condition. Kokesh actually turns around and he interestingly shows, well, if people are defending themselves, how can people that are defending themselves be where the people agree that those that defend themselves, like the United States Army so-called defending the homeland, are heroes? How is the woman and her son not heroes for defending their home against a foreign oppressor, occupier, and someone who's been killing their people? How are they not as much the hero? You watch the denial in the dissonance, but what you understand is the truth of what Kokesh is saying. But the trespasser can't be the hero, despite the popularity of that. So we have to be cautious on what we buy into. We have to be cautious on watching people come out to strike out at other people without a formal base. And behind the Woodshed, we're talking about information on health and like these vaccines. An interesting series of things have come out that just again highlights this problem. Speaking to the social dissonance, the cognitive dissonance in the society. People have a lot of license to do certain things, and yet you look at the facts and you can find out that really these people are kind of criminals, if they aren't, not kind of, but actually criminals to do the assertions. Melinda Gates speaks out against the anti-vaccine movement. Expanding the accessibility of vaccines throughout the developing world has been one of the repeated goals of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Although the controversial anti-vaccine movement has called to the end of the practice, co-chair Melinda Gates is firmly standing by the treatment. Now, won't go through it. I just want to point out something. She's out against the anti-vaccine movement. Remember, her husband is the one that has the formula. If you want climate change to stop, you got to kill people. They come underneath the protecting people, and they give technology that actually hurts them. Then we find out right after that she comes out of anti-vaccine. Yet deaths in the United States during the past 10 years, 2004 to 2015, are regarding measles, are that there have been 0 deaths due to measles. However, the vaccines that people are taking to purportedly stop this problem have killed 108. Now, I had some other information come through another source. It was been 1,600 reported cases of measles in that time and 0 deaths. So to give another number. Their numbers were that 90 some odd had died due to the essentially the MMR vaccine. And then we get this report all coming together. As I tell you, the coincidence for me means something if there is a meaning, and I'm putting a meaning on this. And this is a site I'm not necessarily too in favor of, but we'll go with the information that is truthful and natural news. MMR measles vaccine clinical trial results faked by Big Pharma, shocking U.S. court documents reveal. And so the Big Pharma given license already to give immunity isn't enough. They'll lie about the vaccine. So you need to read about that, read the case, inform yourself that despite Melinda Gates' conflict of interest and also in what the anti-vaccine people do, look at the truth about what the anti-vaccine people are saying about why. Don't take the overall idea that they've worked, because it's apparently not only do they have no effect, at minimum, they are there under a pretense of being right. Even though they say it's scientific, I told you science is fraud. We have the proof over and over that we then get this article. No, this sounded just like the climate denier. Put the climate change deniers in jail. They should all be in prison. We get the same style methodology here in this little story, a little propaganda tool that they use. Jail anti-vax parents. Your family's right to be sick ends where the public health begins. Boy, that's been an ongoing fraud statement. The entirely preventable California measles outbreak was now sickened more than 70 people, with perhaps hundreds more exposed. The outbreak is likely to continue. But as we then look at the truth, you start to find a little bit different story, that healthy people who were vaccinated for the flu continue to die. And so here you have Melinda Gates saying anti-vacciners, no, I'm against that. And you have someone who says, you all that are anti-vaccine need to go to jail because we say that it's good for the public health. They don't address the fact that herd immunity as a concept is not proven and a fraud, and or that it's now known that these again based on 108 that the people who get the flu are dying, the vaccine are dying. And then we find out something fascinating that you would expect when they give you live and only attenuated viruses, that when you get in, your body responds, that you're actually invoking the biogenetically altered organism that is supposed to be the measles organism, but it's not. See, it's genetically modified. That there is a scientific report that the detected measles vaccine organisms in the throat of vaccinated children. Measles vaccine is widely used most often in association with mumps and rubella vaccines. The way we report here, the case of a child presenting with a fever 8 days after vaccination with a measles, mumps, rubella vaccine. Measles virus was isolated in a throat swab taken 4 days after fever's onset. This virus was then further genetically characterized as a vaccine-type virus. Fever occurring subsequent to measles vaccination is related to the replication of the live attenuated vaccine virus. In the case presented here, the vaccine virus was isolated in the throat, showing the subcutaneous injection of an attenuated measles strain can result in respiratory excretion of the virus. So here we have the fact, notwithstanding Melinda Gates' discussion to the contrary, or this idiot over here that wants to say that we jail all the anti-vaccine people, it's the kids that are getting vaccinated that are actually spreading this thing around and through their through excretion from the virus in their throat. Just like a normal flu, but this is the one that's modified, folks. What's interesting to me, and I haven't seen any reports, is the ones that are not the one being blamed, the anti-vaccine kids, whether or not they're getting the one that's modified or not. You know, I haven't noticed any stories about that. So we got proof here, despite Melinda Gates' impression and despite the government saying you have to get vaccinated, we're finding that these vaccines are not only harmful, 108 people have died, but they spread a genetically modified measles around. I hope you pull all that together for you in a little bag of presentation for all these people that are trying to get you to do what you need to do, that you find out that maybe you don't want to do, like the government saying you're going to get these injections and you're religious, and the only thing that used to be stopping it was a religious objection. They're going to try and get rid of that. Now you have proof to counter the presumption that things aren't so square. There's a fraud on the uptake by the agencies not checking it, and then there's direct correlative facts that the vaccine is actually transmittable to other people. It's not stopping anybody, and so that means that anti-vaccine people may actually being affected by it anyway. How about you don't want to be the carrier of that to affect somebody, notwithstanding the fact that measles in its normal form kills nobody. How is it the one that's modified is killing people, folks? What about the report about the non-vaccinated kids that may have had it? Did any of those die? Is there a proof that they don't want to tell you that when you get it injected, it's actually worse than if you just got it through the air? Because if a lot of non-vaccinated kids got this, it's genetically identifiable, and none of them have died, maybe you're looking at the jab itself as a problem, isn't it? So we have a lot of things we can look into on these facts and not take the cognitive dissonance poured out on people or the utilized by certain people to let people absorb and not question critically what's going on, which can literally kill us, I guess is the point. Melinda Gates wants you dead, and this guy wants you in jail if you don't agree to be put in threat of death. Now, does that mean, is it 100% killer? No, but do you want to be the one of the 108 that didn't know? I certainly wouldn't, and I don't even know what I'd think about, like we found out Tyler's story last week where the father going by the experts say, and his son dies. Do you want to be him, that father? Do you want to be Tyler's father? I don't think, I can't speak for you, but I wouldn't. But this is what's on us. And so I give you a package of 4 cases right here that prove I think is a proof of refuting the presumption of the government's position that would impose upon you these things, not only from the uptake side, but actually you being the vector itself. And so we see the things going on in Disneyland that's supposedly blowing up like a balloon may very well be, as we've said before, on and on and on. It's the vaccine itself causing the outbreak. It's not the ones that don't get it, and the ones that actually are healthy and probably are more healthy because they understand not to do this. They're not the transmitters of this problem. It's a self-inflicted wound. You have to have that in you and the proof of it and in all these areas now. And if not for you, if you've got some time and you find it of interest and you are appalled about it as I am or worse, then maybe you can compile this information for someone else who needs it. One thing here, I'm going to run out of time. I got a few minutes, but not going to be able to get to where I wanted to go completely. Almost got to the end. I did get to the point I was talking earlier in the broadcast I wanted to get to, so I've done that part. But something came up just out of the blue. I haven't really been too interested in it. Like I said before, it's cannabis. A lot of people are, I suppose. What got me more was finding out, because I'm more into herbs, the herbal thing, herbal remedies. Try to get yourself fortified, your body fortified ahead of time, so that you have the best chance to best defenses before something gets down on you, and then your body is healthy enough to deal with it. So I'm on the herbal side issues, and to me, the plants are plants. And to me, it didn't occur to me that cannabis had anything for me, and I still don't think that it does in any of the regards that I see it being used. However, there are people that do need it as an herbal remedy to what ails them, their diseases. And so, at that extent, I now realize it's a crime, what's been going on around cannabis and its medical purpose, where the government says it has no purpose, and then they take out the patents to say that it has a purpose. This problem, this disconnect that goes on. Well, there's been plenty of measures that went through for legalizing, so-called legalizing this stuff. That I want you to be very careful of. I've only got a few minutes to do this. I was asked to look at the Oregon measure. And I'm going to cut to the chase, folks. I don't know what other states have done. I haven't had a chance. You need to go look at all these bills. Look very carefully at whatever state wants to bring these in or has brought them in. And I'm going to suggest something to you. They are not very easy to understand. They almost eliminate the ability to create the most potent extracts. You cannot have those actually underneath the law I looked at, unless you buy it from the licensed purveyor. And then I noticed something really dangerous, that they are actually incrementally criminalizing what's going on. They allow homegrown to have their little bit, but in actuality, I realized when they went, there is also forfeiture provisions, and there's two forfeiture sections. One does not exempt homegrown, and it puts limitations on what that is. And what I realize is the same con game. If you have, let's say, 4 plants under this law, you might actually find yourself with 5 plants when they finally go to charge you, and they steal your house. What this looks like the labeling law. Big business, warehouse industry, this law is written for that, and they actually have the provisions that warehouse industry can complain against a home grower for a violation, puts all the heat on the grower who's homegrown, and they're really defenseless against an attack. And all their stuff is stolen right off the bat. It's just an extension of a forfeiture law. You open your place up to search. When you start growing, you don't have the Fourth Amendment right anymore. On top of all the other stuff. If they were going to recognize one before, you don't. I'm asking you very carefully to look at your legalization laws. They're not in my mind. I'm back to the same point. If they want to legalize it, they should have just dropped the criminalization of it. And what this is being treated of, almost the same, but not the same and worse, is alcohol. They're going through, at least in Oregon law, through their OLCC, which is their Oregon liquor license stuff. And so it's taxed that way. what caused my attention is that I was called to it because it looked like the county was going to charge us what appeared to be a product tax, which is a sales tax which couldn't originate out of the county, and that's what I was analyzing for. But there's forfeiture provisions, folks, that you need to be very, very cognizant of in these things. They're a trap, I think, just like the GMO labeling law. So that's enough here, I guess, today. We're at the end. I thank you very much for tuning in. Support who you're listening to on the networks. Thank you for WT, for World Truth, for sending out beaming the signal to everyone. And I do appreciate you that you're tuning in. Send the podcast around and have a discussion and prepare yourself for, don't be surprised anymore, folks, because it's all around us. What I've been declaring you is coming is in our face now.